laughter and shaking the head, right? Because whether you're a Christian, whether you call yourself a Christian, you're a follower of Jesus or not, at one time or another in our life, we've tried to make a deal with God. We've tried to bargain with God. When you're young, it's has stuff to do with like maybe a girl or a boy. God, if you'll do this, then, that kind of thing. Or maybe it has something to do with you got into trouble and getting out of trouble, or maybe it's something to do with curfew. As adults, it's maybe a little bit different stuff, but we all do that. We all bargain with God. In the end, it's what we try to do is we're trying to get God in on the thing that we're doing. Isn't that true? Right? We're trying to get God to give us a nod, tip his hat to the thing that we're trying to do. We're trying to leverage God's power so it'll benefit us in the end, right? Trying to leverage God's power. Now listen, sometimes it's legit, isn't it? Sometimes you have a sick child or a spouse or something like that, and you're like, God, whatever it takes, right? My child needs healing, my spouse needs this or whatever. Michelle and I started watching this new show on Hulu. I think it's called Fargo. Anybody watch Fargo? Anyways, in the beginning scenes, there's this guy driving down the road, and his wife's next to him, and it's in Fargo, in South Dakota or whatever. All right, hey, listen, you don't have a mic back there. Just be quiet. It's in the Dakotas, and snowing and everything. They're driving down the road. Runs out of gas, and his wife's giving him a hard time, and he's like praying. He says, God, if you get me out of this, I'll do anything. I'll serve, all the stuff you bargain with. And he looks over and he sees something in the snow. He goes over and digs it out, and there's this suitcase full of money. And he's like, there is a God, that sort of thing. I know for me, one time, who's in my group, kidney stone people? Who's on the team? Just three of us? That's it? You guys are missing out. Aren't they missing out, Bill? They're missing out. You should join our team. It's a lot of fun being on the kidney stone team. One time, I was hurting so bad, and I've only gone to the hospital one time, and I should have gone multiple times, but this time I was hurting so bad. And I thought, I'm going to wake everybody up in the house. So I left, and I came here to the church. I was down in the basement of the church, and I started out, pain was so bad, I started out, bargaining with God. God, if you just take this pain away, then, my goodness, I'll do, whatever it takes. And then that didn't work, and I got mad at God. I started yelling at him, you don't care, where are you, you're not even around. Then back to, I'm sorry, back to bargaining with him again, right? And we've all done that. We've all gone through that. God, I need you to do this, basically. And so what is it that you need me to do so I can get that? Isn't that kind of where our thoughts are, right? Right? What do I need to do? Just tell me what I need to do. I'll do it in order for you to do this. God, if you will blank, then I will blank. How many have been there? We've all been there. At the end of the day, that's what we're trying to figure out. We need to find out what we can do to get God on our side. And maybe for some people, at least in my experience, some people, that this is in their past. And what I mean by that is this. They've been through that bargaining stage, right? God didn't come through with whatever it was, a sickness, something like that. God didn't come through. So you know what they said? They said, forget it. Forget it. God, you're supposed to be all powerful and all loving. Why didn't you do this thing? You could have done this thing so easily. So you didn't do what I wanted, so forget you. In other words, God didn't behave, right? Listen, God didn't behave in the way I thought he should behave, so therefore, I'm not going to behave. So some people have been through that in their life, and so they've bailed on God. They said, maybe they come to church, maybe they just sit there, maybe they just backed out on everything. They just don't do anything anymore. So today's character tried to get Jesus to do his bidding. So we're talking about a couple characters here in the Bible. And so this character tried to get Jesus to do his bidding, and this character couldn't get Jesus specifically to do what he wanted, so he bailed. And just like last week, the reason we're talking about this week is there's a little bit of this character in all of us, just like last week. And so, and how do I know this? How do I know that there's a little bit of this character in all of us? Well, I know because when I asked the question, have you bargained with God? You all nodded, smiled, laughed nervously, right? Because you know. So there's a little bit of him in all of us. And this character is none other than Judas Iscariot. How many have heard of Judas? You heard of Judas? So for Judas, Jesus was really a means to an end. Now, before we're too hard on Judas, we're going to get to the whole story. Really, for all 12 disciples, all the apostles, right? Jesus was a means to an end. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. So there's a story in the Bible. Let me tell you this story. It's a story of a rich young ruler. Now, I don't know why they use the word ruler in there. I think it's in the English. They just throw that word in there in the English for some reason. But this rich young ruler, he was talking to Jesus, and he said this, asked this question: what do I have to do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus said, well, listen, you need to follow all the law, do all the commands and all that, all that perfectly. And he responds, well, I already do that, which he didn't, right? We know that. But he responds, well, I've already done that. Jesus said, great, you're almost there. You're almost there. You're this close. Now what you have to do is you have to sell all your possessions, give it to the poor, and come and follow me. And how's the story end? The story ends with this rich young ruler, this rich young man, going away very sad. Why? Because he owned a lot of stuff. And so the disciples are listening to this, and they're kind of confused by it. And so Jesus says to the disciples this, that it's difficult, it will be difficult for a rich person to follow me. It's going to be hard. Why? Because they have a lot of stuff. And the disciples were like, wow, man, they didn't really kind of get it. So Peter asked what some of us maybe are thinking about. And Peter said this out loud, as a matter of fact. He probably shouldn't have said it out loud. He was thinking it. And Peter said this. Peter answered him. He said this: we have left everything to follow you. Now, let me just tell you, this hits real home. Hits home for me, because being a missionary, I got to be honest with you, I felt this way. You know what I mean? I've given up everything. Right? I left home. I went over, Africa, and put my family in harm's way. One of my kids got malaria. I got malaria. It's like kind of this idea that I've left everything to follow you. And then he says something. He follows it up with something that he definitely shouldn't have said. He said this: what is there in it for us? Right? What is there in it for us? Now, I'll be honest with you. I've never said that. But if I'm honest, like I thought it. God, here I am. Especially when we came back to Africa, and the story. We lost a baby. I'm like, God, this is not supposed to work this way. Give up everything. Right? In other words, I did my part. God, it's your turn. It's your turn to do your part. So, you may be thinking, God, I gave up my Sunday mornings, and I get up and I come here to church, right? Or I give up my money. Like I give, at least what's in my wallet that Sunday morning, or in my purse, I give that, or, whatever it is. And we give up. We say, I quit doing whatever, right? I'll quit smoking, I'll quit drinking, I'll quit chewing, I'll quit running with girls that do, right? That's the old joke. And so the question that they asked, the question that Judas asked, because Jesus to them was always, and you got to be careful about this in our own life, Jesus was always a means to an end. And this idea that if you'll do your part, God's going to do his part, is pervasive in the church. You look at the peace, prosperity preachers right now. That's what they're telling you. If you'll do this, then God's going to do this. Am I right? That's what you hear all the time. And these guys are multi-millionaires. Why are they multi-millionaires? Because you know why? Because we all have this in us. We all want to believe to some degree that that's true. We want to believe it. We want to believe in a quid pro quo relationship with God. Isn't that right? Right? If I do my part, and that's they'll tell you, do your part. Send in your seed, sow your seed, then God's going to do this. Do this, buy this handkerchief and you'll have your healing. Like whatever it is. And we so desperately want it to work that way. Because we think, even though we can't follow God perfectly, we think, well, I'll just do my best, and God can only do his best, right? And so we so desperately want it to work that way. And then in the end, the 12, right? The 12, when it dawned on them, if you think about the story, when it dawned on them, when Jesus was finally arrested, and we'll get to the whole story, when he was finally arrested, what did the 12 do? They left. Why did they leave? They left because they realized there's nothing in it for us. As a matter of fact, the only thing that may be in it for us is more of the same that Jesus is getting, right? Because the way he goes, I go. And so sorry about my voice here. I was losing my voice this week. It's starting to come back, but still a little rough. And so all of them walked away. They walked away because there was nothing in it for them, because Jesus to them, to a certain degree, was a means to an end. Now, we all know the story that they came back later on, and we'll talk a little bit about that. Most of them came back except for one, Judas. Judas Iscariot did not come back. Why is that? Well, probably a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is Judas had this Old Testament mentality. This Old Testament mentality that Messiah is going to come, and when the Messiah comes, he's going to make all things right for us, right? Meaning the Jews. He's going to overthrow Rome. Finally, we're going to get our freedom, and all the things that Jesus did, and he knew the Old Testament, and so he saw that Jesus was a fulfillment of a lot of the messianic prophecies in the Old Testament. So he's looking to Jesus saying, yeah, this guy's it. Like, he's the guy. And so he followed him for why? Because of what it's going to mean to him. They're going to free him from Roman oppression, right? And Jesus fit the bill in all those things, except for one major thing, one major problem. Was Jesus didn't hate the Romans. That was a problem, wasn't it? Because that's who they wanted to be free from, and Jesus didn't hate them. Also, the other problem was this. So if they want the Messiah to free the Jewish people from Roman oppression, they need their Messiah to be against Rome. Jesus wasn't. And they need him before the religious leaders and the temple, because they're going to need the religious leaders and the temple. And who did Jesus have the most trouble with in his life? The religious leaders. So Judas saw this, and Judas saw this to be a problem, because he was going to need Galilee, Judea, all these areas to come together to be able to kick out Rome. And then when that happened, for the temple kind of to rise up and to take over, and the temple leaders. And so that was a problem. Another problem was this. Jesus wasn't very good at saving money. He'd get money, and guess what he'd do? He'd give it away. He'd give it away to the poor. And listen, if you want to have a movement, what do you need? You need money. And so this was a problem, especially a problem for Judas. You know why? Judas, amongst the group, he was the treasurer. He was one that handled the money. And so he saw this being a huge problem. And so he was like, Jesus, if you would just behave correctly, right? And Jesus was not behaving correctly according to the way Judas thought. And so Judas began to lose his patience with Jesus. And then finally something happened. It was the final straw for Judas, the final straw. And amazingly, this event that took place was an extraordinary act of generosity. That was strangely, that's the last straw for Judas. This story takes place east of Jerusalem, only about a mile and a half. So you could call it a suburb of Jerusalem, in a little village called Bethany. The story's in Matthew. Let me read you some of it. Matthew 26, it says this. while Jesus was in Bethany, in the home of Simon the leper, we don't really know who that is, right, who Simon the leper was, said a woman came to him with an alabaster jar of expensive perfume, which she poured out on his head as he was reclining at the table. So let me just talk to you about that a minute. They weren't sitting in chairs. They were kind of sitting on the ground, kind of leaning on his arm, right? And she came with this alabaster jar of perfume. Pete's not in here right now, but he tells a story about when he was with the Steelers, that some guy came and was selling them these little vials of something that said that's going to make them, it was actually some kind of ginseng extract, going to make them like super aware and like, the top of their game and everything. And so he said they were sitting in the locker room before, and all the linemen were there, and they're all taped up, their hands are taped up, and had these little vials like this. Trouble with the little vials, they didn't have a little top on them or anything. They were completely sealed up. So you had to take a little stone and you had to cut it like this. You had to cut and then snap that top off, and then you had to use it, right? And so they drank these vials, and he'll tell you the whole story. They were all jittery. It was pure ginseng. They were supposed to take 1 or 2 drops and put it in a cup of tea, and they drank their whole vials, right? And so that's what this alabaster jar was. It was this jar of this expensive perfume, and you had to kind of break the top off, because it was sealed, break the top off, and once you did that, then you use the perfume, right? Now, the story's in Matthew. In John gives us another detail in there that's not in Matthew. This is an important detail, and he says that this alabaster jar of perfume cost about a year's wage. A year's wage. So, they say the average wage in America, the last time I heard was like $60,000 or something like that, somewhere around there, $60,000. So can you imagine that? Picture that for a minute, $60,000 a year's wage, whatever it was in the day. Now, let's say it was just half that, 30,000, not half, maybe 10,000, or 5,000, or wait a minute, 1,000. What about $1,000? $1,000 seems like a lot of waste. And they were like, listen, why can't you should have taken that? You could have used a little bit of it. You could have put it in smaller bottles. You could have sold it for money. You could have gave it to the poor. Right? And so you can imagine the sigh in the room when they see this taking place. She takes this expensive perfume and she pours it on Jesus' head. What a waste. Matthew 26 says this. When the disciples saw this, they were indignant. Why this waste, they asked. This perfume could have been sold at a high price and the money given to the poor. So you picture this. Jesus is there around this table on the floor, and Jesus at one end, and she's there doing this, and they're just murmuring. They're talking about this, about what's going on. It's amazing to me that Jesus was able to answer questions before they were even asked. As a matter of fact, Jesus answered questions that were at the heart of the question, not what it sounded like. Do you follow me? Like Jesus knew. And so he said this, Jesus said, or it says this in the Bible in Matthew, aware of this, Jesus said to them, why are you bothering this woman? She has done a beautiful thing to me. She honored me and showed me how much respect that she has for me. Now, here's a famous verse. You all probably know this, Matthew 26:11. Jesus says, it's the poor you will always have with you, right? Everybody heard that before? The poor you'll always have with you. And then Jesus said something pretty disturbing. If you can imagine this setting, they're all in there, and they're imagine that feeling. You're thinking, what's in this for me? Following Jesus, Peter said this question, right? What's in this for us? And they were all thinking that. Judas was thinking that as well. He said this, but you will not always have me. The poor are always going to be with you, but you will not always have me. He continued. When she poured this perfume on my body, she did it to prepare me for burial. The disciples like, burial? I mean, like burial for the dead you're talking about. No. See, you're the Messiah. You're the one that's come to liberate us. Dying, no, that's not in the cards for you, right? You know how long we've been waiting for you? Our parents, our grandparents, their parents, great-grandparents, they've been waiting for decades. Century for you to come. The real issue was this. The real issue was, if you die, then what? What's going to happen to us? Exactly right. What's going to happen to us? Because as you go, we go. Suddenly, just all of a sudden, they forgot all about the perfume, didn't they? Perfume was not an issue now. Now they're thinking about themselves. Now for the best part, Jesus says something that's, like, I hope you read your Bible, and I hope when you come across stuff like this, you think about this, and you, like, this is something, like, this is huge as far as I'm concerned. This is huge. I hope you think it's huge too. I hope that anybody who hears this should think this is just absolutely crazy. It says this. Listen to this. Matthew 26:13. Are you ready for this? This is big. Honestly, it really is. It says this. Truly I tell you, whenever this gospel, now really we just wrote gospel there, but what he's saying is there's no gospel yet. He's writing this. There's no gospel meaning Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the gospels, or, right, the good news. Really, he's saying this story. I tell you the truth. Whenever this story is preached, where? In Jerusalem? No, throughout the world. Whenever this story, what story? This story of them in a small village, 1.5 miles from Jerusalem, right? In this room, it's just them. They're having a meal. And he said, this story, the one you're experiencing right now, right? This woman with the alabaster jar of perfume, and what you guys think, this story right here, that you think is of no consequence, you think she's just crazy, this is a waste. This story right now will be preached throughout the world. And he says this. And what she has done will also be told in memory of her. Like, this is big. This thing, this event of no consequence. Really, they just think it's awful. Jesus is saying, this story is going to be shared. I may have heard this story before. Heard this story before? We all have. All over the world. All over the world, some 2,000 years later. Jesus knew that this story was going to be told in languages that weren't even around yet, to people groups that weren't there yet. All around the world, Jesus knew this story right here. Listen, if you doubt the Bible, listen, there's plenty of reasons, but this is one. This is one right there. Jesus made this prediction. This story is going to be told throughout history and throughout the world. And he says, in memory also of her. In memory of her. To them, this was just a meal. They had no idea that they were making history. They had no clue. John gives us more detail because obviously he was there. He said this, Judas was actually kind of stirring the pot a little bit here because he was the treasurer, like I told you. John actually said he was a thief because he stole from the treasury. This money was supposed to be used for their work, for traveling and so forth, right? For Judas, this was the end, right? He thought, Jesus, you have totally lost your way. You've wasted so much money already. You've lost your perspective, and I have wasted my life. I have wasted my life. Why? Well, because you're not doing the things that I think that you should do, that I think the Messiah should do. So maybe I just need to do something different with my life. Matthew tells us right after this that then one of the 12, the one called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests. Now, where are the chief priests? They're 1.5 miles away in Jerusalem. He went to the chief priests, they were in Jerusalem, and asked, now pay attention to this question. He says this, what are you willing to give me if I deliver him over to you? I deliver him over to you. Now, we don't know exactly what was all going on through Judas's mind, his head at the time. But one thing we know is that however this ended, this was going to end well for Judas. That's what he had in his mind. It's going to end up well for him. Now, this is an important conversation he has. So it says, if I deliver him. So think about this for a minute. Let's go back last week. What was keeping the religious leaders, Caiaphas especially, what was keeping him, it was one word from last week, keeping them from arresting Jesus? One word. The what? The crowd. The crowd. Exactly right. And so Judas comes basically saying this, listen, I'm an insider. I'm an insider. I can let you know, now this is important, so I can let you know when he's away from the crowds, because that's your problem. That's your problem, right? You're worried about inciting riot. You can't do it. You can't arrest him in front of the crowds. You know it. I know it. And so I'm an insider. I can let you know when he's separated from the crowds. And they said this, now that's worth something to us. And so they struck a deal for 30 pieces of silver. 30 pieces of silver. Says that in Matthew 26:15. So they counted out 30 pieces of silver. Now, just pause for a minute. Let's remember that Judas has been traveling with Jesus. He's been on boats with them. He's seen miraculous things take place. He's seen miracles. He's seen healings. He's looked into Jesus' eyes like he's been with him. He watched him heal people. But all of that being said, he was still fed up with Jesus because why? Because he couldn't get Jesus to do what he thought Jesus should be doing. So 30 pieces of silver in the day, it really wasn't a lot of money. It was basically the cost of what a slave would be. I was thinking through my life, just as I was sitting last night thinking about this. Thinking about what have I maybe been willing to trade for my relationship in my life, in my past, trade for my relationship with Jesus. See, here's the thing about that. Even though he was with Jesus all that time, still he lost his way, and in the moment it felt right. It felt right. I often talk about living top down or inside out and not outside in, about the flesh. The Bible talks so much about the flesh, about gratifying the flesh, about getting what you want, when you want it, and how you want it. Allowing your flesh, allowing the external world to dictate to you how you should live, what you should want, how you should go about getting it. And in the moment, it always feels like the right thing to do. Because why? We probably ask himself this. Probably ask himself, what am I getting out of this relationship? What am I getting out of it? I got to be honest with you, when I was pacing downstairs in the basement with all that pain, you guys know that have kidney stone pain. It's the worst. Now, I'm just going to tell you this. I don't know this for sure, but women say kidney stone pain in childbirth, they say kidney stone pain is worse. That's women saying, not me. Kidney stone pain is worse than childbirth. And so I know, I'm thinking, okay, I'm serving you, God. I'm here. I'm a pastor. I was a missionary. I got this pain. What am I getting out of this relationship anyways, if I'm honest? And then Matthew 26:16 says this. So from then on, Judas watched for an opportunity to hand him over. And this is where in the TV show the dramatic music comes and everything, and that's where all the drama starts. And so Jesus sends his disciples to the city to find a place for them to share the Passover meal. And at that meal, Jesus does something. He takes off his rabbinic clothing and puts a towel around his waist, begins to wash the disciples' feet. And they're like, oh, no, Jesus, you're not going to wash our feet. And Jesus said, no, I am. Yeah, sit down and shut up. He didn't say sit down and shut up, but I'm going to wash your feet. He said, in doing this, I'm setting an example for you, actually for the rest of your life. For the rest of your life. Now, Jesus, you're acting like a servant. You're not a servant, you're a king. But you're acting like a servant. This is so troubling for them. And it basically is kind of like, you think I'm a big deal. You guys think I'm a big deal. That's why I'm going to wash your feet, because when you in your life begin to think that you're a big deal, what you need to do is behave like a servant and wash feet. And so after he's done, he puts his rabbinic robe back on. For us, this is just a story, just kind of a story, another story in the Bible. But for them, you have to try to imagine what life was like for them. This was disturbing to them. This was so troublesome to them. Because he shouldn't be behaving. Doesn't he realize who he is? Do you follow me? You get the sense that they're in this, at least at this time, they're in this more for themselves than they are for him. Because Jesus, we want you to behave like this because we're your closest followers. Because when you accomplish what you're supposed to accomplish, we're right here. We're right here. And man, good things are going to come our way. That's why that peace prosperity doctrine works so well. It works so well. Just promise those things. You'll get people by the thousands, tens of thousands, opening up their wallet, just pouring the money out. You'll get it. So they go to the garden to pray. Or they're going to go to the garden. In the story, it doesn't say who had that idea. Whether Jesus said, let's go to the garden to pray, the Garden of Gethsemane, or one of the disciples. We don't know who said it. But at that moment, when that was decided to go to the garden to pray, can you imagine Judas goes, this is it. This is it. This is the time. But he has a little problem, doesn't he? He has a little problem. How am I going to get out of here? How am I going to get out of here to go tell the elders and the chief priests that tonight's the night? How am I going to do it? As he's trying to figure this out, Jesus says something that must have put chills down his spine. Jesus said this, very truly I tell you, one of you is going to betray me. Can you imagine Judas at that moment? Put yourself in his shoes. He's thinking, man, the jig is up. Like I'm done. How did I think that I could plan this and scheme this without Jesus knowing? He knows things before they even happen. How did I think I could get away with this? Now he's thinking, what's going to happen now? They knew that Peter's been carrying around this sword for a while. He had no idea how to use it, but he figured, well, he's probably going to use it on me now, right? He's thinking this is it for him. And Judas was expecting probably, as you can imagine, probably to be revealed now. One of you is going to betray me. Well, here it is. Jesus is going to go, and it's, right? While the whole group was in chaos, talking about this, wondering, what is he talking about? Jesus leans over to Judas and says this, what you're about to do quickly. Judas must have been like, what in the world? Says this in the Bible. But no one at the meal understood why Jesus said this to him. They must have just assumed that he's sending him on some errand or something like that. And in John 13:31 it says this, when he was gone, Jesus said this, now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. In other words, everything is working exactly as planned. This is a reminder to us, friends, of two things. One is, you cannot and I cannot force God's hand. You can't force his hand, nor can you thwart the plans of God. Now, Judas probably, this is some conjecture here, right? Maybe kind of read between the lines because of what comes after, what happens after. So I won't get there yet, but because of what happens after, probably Judas thought he's going to be arrested, he might be put in jail, he might be fined, he might be exiled. Something like that's going to happen. But whatever happens, whatever that bad happens, I still come out on top. He wasn't doing what I wanted. I got the 30 pieces of silver, so I'm good. I'm good. And then Judas finds out something that he didn't anticipate. And things kind of get out of control. After the arrest, when Judas found out that they went to Caiaphas, and Caiaphas then went to Pilate. Pilate was the head of the Roman guard then, right? The head of all Rome then. And so when Caiaphas went to him, Judas instantly knew at that minute that didn't mean jail, that didn't mean exile, that didn't mean fine. That meant one thing when he went to Rome. What did it mean? Death. It meant death. Matthew 27:3 says this. When Judas, who had betrayed him, saw that Jesus was condemned, he was seized with remorse, and he returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders. What's extraordinary about this is in 1 minute, what you value so much in the next minute can mean absolutely nothing. Something of extraordinary importance to you 1 minute, the next minute can mean absolutely nothing. He sacrificed everything. He sacrificed his relationship with Jesus. Now he wished he had never done that. And this is what I think some of us are living even now, right? As I said last week, our greatest regret, and your greatest regret and my greatest regret, oftentimes are associated to something that we're hanging on to, something we're trying to prop up in our past that isn't even a part of our life right now. And if you sit for very long, you could think of things. Think of things that were so important to you that you almost did anything to do, to keep, to have, that aren't even a part of your life right now. And Judas's greatest regret was trying to force God's hand. He says this, Matthew 27:4. He said, I have sinned, he said, and I have betrayed innocent blood. And then listen, watch this. This is I'm going to close here because this is landing the plane. He said, I have sinned, for I have betrayed innocent blood. They said, the priests and the elders, what is that to us? They replied. Now here's the powerful statement. You ready for this? That's your responsibility. That's your responsibility. So Judas threw the money into the temple and left. Then he went away and hanged himself. Judas, well, to use Jesus' words, Judas gained 30 pieces of worldly silver, but he lost his soul. Why is this such a big deal? Well, many people reject Jesus for what in the end ends up not being anything lasting at all anyways. That's been experience of my own, but it's been experience being a pastor, being a missionary. It's not even a part of them right now. They hurt themselves. They want something so bad, and they're willing to do anything for it, and they forsake a relationship. And what a relationship with Jesus, what ends up happening is this. They end up hurting themselves, and they end up hurting those around them. Here's a sober thought. When we barter with God rather than surrender to him, you and I, we are responsible for the outcome. We're responsible for the outcome. Let me just say this to us. I'm going to close with this. It's time. When you surrender to God, when you surrender your life over to God, you no longer are saying, God, this is what I want, do what I want, or else make deals with him, threaten him. When you surrender to God's will, guess who's responsible for the outcome? God is. God's responsible for the outcome. Just let that linger in the air for a minute. Would you rather barter, try to get your own way, and be like Judas, and say, well, listen, that's your responsibility? Or give your life over to God. Surrender to him, to his ways. They're always the best. I know it might not seem like it sometimes, but it's always the best. And God will be responsible for the outcome. Let's stand. Father, we're thankful for the these stories, this history that's been preserved for us, that we can read it and we can get insight into that world and apply it to our world, God. Because God, you care that much. You love that much. But you also love so much that you're not willing to force anybody against their will to do anything. You love that much. And the unfortunate part is, God, when we do that, when we go our own way, there's no one responsible for the outcome but us. So God, my prayer is for everybody here, everybody listening to my voice, God, that we will begin to learn to trust in God, to read his word and say, no, this is the way to live. This is how God wants me to treat my wife, the people around me, to live in this world. I want to surrender, God, to your will. And God, I'm not responsible for the outcome, but you are. And I trust you with it. We thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Thanks, friends.